So welcome to Clear Passage Prayer Ministries. We're on every morning from Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I am Althea Bolden. I will be your teacher for the next 20 minutes. And the topic today is the mission of love. The mission of love. The I'm trying. Of course, we're going to do the Corinthians scripture. But before we do that, I wanted to explain. Some people have a gifting, and you just assume. Sometimes when you are functioning a certain way, you assume that everybody is functioning that same way, and you don't understand. But I will tell you the greatest attribute that you have in your life, in your being, is your heart. It is the well from which you pray. It's the well from which you care and function in the earth realm. And it's the thing you have to protect. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago about the power of loving, and the power of you have to love in a way that you're unprotected. And when I say that, that means you go all in. It's not you're loving, you're like a chessboard. I'm going to love and get up to here. And you put all these safeguards in there. You don't have love. You have a structure. And it's not, love needs to flow, period. It's like you're all in. And once you get all in and you love that way, then you give room for the overflow of the love out of your heart to heal the other person. If you heal and if you love in a very transactional way, then you're going to get a transactional return, and it's not really love. It's a condition. It's a pleasant condition, and you're cordial. But love goes the distance, and love will fight with you to get you to do the right thing. When you love your children, you fight with them for them to do the right thing. It's not that you have I'm gotta back up a little bit. It's not that you have that you just, love does not mean that you're going to be pleasant all the time, that you're going to be cordial. Sometimes people can be cordial because they don't want to get involved. Sometimes to invest in a situation, to invest in a person, to invest in a thing, you have to get up in there and you have to have the conversation. And sometimes you don't want to do that. It's a little bit difficult to go. It's easier to sit back and have a peripheral environment, but love is like wrestling is such a good example. When you are it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principality, but against spiritual forces or principalities in high places, but we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Love is what sent Jesus to the cross. It was a violent ending. So everything that is the way love expresses itself is not necessarily in a cordial, wonderful, skipping through the tulips kind of a situation. Sometimes love goes to battle. Sometimes love stands in the gap. Sometimes love speaks for the people that can't speak for themselves. Sometimes love looks past the person, what's coming out of the person's mouth, and goes into what goes past what's coming out of the person's mouth and sees the heart. When you have people that, usually God will match loving people with difficult to love people. And why is that? Loving you with difficult to love people. And the reason is because Your capacity to love is your treasure. It is the thing that transitions a egg to a chick. It transitions an embryo. And when I say that, a baby born healthy. When I say born healthy, I mean born with the consciousness that they're wanted. Love is a nurturer. Love is a thing that they do. And I think I've said this before. I'm reiterating a little bit because I need to get to the next level. Love is a thing that causes you to look beyond current circumstances and know what your mission is and to stay on point. Love causes you to do that. Love causes you to, there was a guy that was I don't know if he was in a concentration camp or in a prison system, but his job was to dump the buckets of human waste through the prison. So that's what he did. He picked up the buckets and took them to a ditch and dumped them. And he came back. And this man they mocked him as he walked there. The guards mocked him as he dumped the boo-boo. Oh, somebody put yourself on mute, you guys, so that it won't be a double. If you're watching on both, put yourself on mute on the Uber part. And so he would carry the buckets of boo-boo and dump them in this is a true story, buckets of boo-boo, and this was during World War II or something like that, and he would dump them in the big terrain where all the feces was going. And he started singing that song, I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses. And there was a part of it, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, I think that's the words, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me that I'm his own. This man was operating in a vein of love in the midst of horrible circumstances, and soon after that, the guards stopped talking about him. They stopped laughing. And some of those guards were converted, but he said that they stopped laughing. They started respecting him, and they were converted by his love walk, by how he functioned in love. It's easy to love people that are loving you. It is miraculous and divine to love people that are not loving you, that are not expressing it, that are not, sometimes they're actually talking about you or talking against you, and you have to still love them anyway. And the reason that is so important is that once you demonstrate, the love of God goes past the tit for tat love. You love me, I'm gonna love you. You do this, I'm gonna do that. That's anybody can do that. Anybody can love a kind, wonderful person. It's the difficult cases. And that ministry goes out into the difficult cases, into the places where it's hard to love anyway. And so the portion of your walk is that you have to know that you're not loving to be loved back. You're loving intentionally to cause the change that love will do. If you will love without looking for a return, then what that will cause is it will allow God to use you. If you're like, when people pay, used to say when people pay their tithes, if you're walking, they used to have, when you walk down the center of the church waving your tithes, you got your reward because everybody saw you. But you're supposed to do it in secret, and then God will reward you openly. When you love in a way that is not to tell everybody what you did, but you love in a way the person may not even know what you did. People, how many times have people have delivered groceries on someone's porch and they don't know where they came from? And so they, everybody can't receive a blessing because of the shame factor, you know, and people help out, and it's done without somebody saying, you're gonna, I did it, I want credit, I want you to tell me thank you. No. As unto the Lord means you have to learn how to do this thing without, in a way that God would want you to do it, and which is different than humans would want you to do it. Maxine was telling people a while back when they were giving into some, I can't remember what the event was, but they were giving clothing to people. And she told them, don't give them raggedy stuff that you don't want. Give them stuff that's new. Give them stuff that's that's in the package, so that they can feel a sense of, because people, you know how people just schlep something over there. Here, you ought to be grateful for what you have. That's not giving. That is cruelty. You give like you would want somebody to give it to you, with dignity, with, can you please take it? Can you please, you give it in a way that is gracious. It's a way to do a thing. You got to do a thing, and then you got to do a thing, but then there's a way to do it. So in your love walk, God will very likely send you to the difficult cases, and you got to know how to do that walk. How to do the difficult walk. A difficult walk was when they came over the bridge in Martin Luther King, when they were walking and being spat on and talked to crazy, and the venom of hatred was so obvious, and yet they had to maintain that love walk, that as unto the Lord. As unto the Lord. It's easy to love lovable people. It is divine to love people that are difficult to love. And those are usually the people that are hurt, the people that are already rejected, so they're going to reject you before you reject them. People that are injured, hurt people, people that have come from abusive family backgrounds, don't know how to completely love. Sometimes they don't know the definition of it. They don't know how to do it. And how do you love? That means no matter what. It's like this. It's like, can you see it's like this. No matter what, I'm not letting go. No matter what, I'm not no matter what, I'm not going to allow you, I'm not letting go. I'm not letting go. Sometimes you have to do something that's non-conventional. There was a surgeon that I watched, and it can come from anywhere. I keep talking about the 9/11 because that was such an example of duty and love that it is just beyond words. But one of the examples, there was a storm somewhere in the South, and there was 2 hospitals, and one surgeon needed to get to the other hospital, which was 6 miles away, for a heart transplant, or the patient was going to die. But there was a flood or snow or something was really serious going on, that the roads were blocked. And the surgeon from the one hospital changed his shoes, and he walked to the other hospital to do the surgery. And not only is he going to save the man's life when he gets there, but he walked 6 miles to do it. So the duty of love is extraordinary. Is the extraordinary processes. Teachers have worked with students that have had learning disabilities, come to school hungry. In order for the student to be able to function in the classroom, she had to buy food for the family, or she had to buy school supplies. I remember when we were in a great school. My kids were in a great school. We had to all toss in money for the school supplies because there wasn't enough. And not only we had supplies for the kids, but some kids didn't. And in order there to be uniform gifting, everybody contributed, so all the kids would have their what they needed. And love doesn't allow people to feel ashamed. I remember there was a friend of mine at work. And I'm just telling you tidbit stories. She was coming back. She was in New York visiting another one of our coworkers, and she was coming back to California. And the one that was there in New York she didn't have a coat, and the one that was coming back to California, she did have a coat. She just took her coat off and she gave it to her. Beautiful. She took her coat off and gave it to her and said, "Here, you need a coat." And you think that's a small thing, giving somebody a pair of shoes when their feet are cold, socks, blankets. These are things that you think are typical. Everybody doesn't have it. Some kids come to school without coats. They come to classrooms and they are really, really hungry. And it's very hard to concentrate when your stomach is griping. So, these are things that we have. This is how you prepare a situation for something to be successful. Some kids, their parents aren't even home, and they what's her name? I can't. She worked. She was on The Help. She worked as the maid on The Help. She was really good. She worked as the woman king as well. I can't think of her name right now, but
Viola Davis.
Viola Davis, thank you. She was talking about she slept with her brothers and sisters at home, and she go to school smelling like pee because one of her brothers and sisters peed in the bed. And if you ever been around kids that's happened to, and it gets all in your clothes and you just can't get it out, it gets in your hair, you just smell like pee. And she said that so kids make fun of you, and it creates a certain hardness, but it's an embarrassment. It's just something else that you have to overcome, and you have to have some compassion and understanding. What does this person have to go through? Everybody shows up in the classroom, but the journey to the classroom is not the same. Some kids have to struggle at such an early age that it is there for them to even grasp anything. Once they get to school, it's a safe haven. For them to even grasp something is a monumental task. And there is a situation we have now with all the drug addiction that parents are not conscious. Women and men will sell their children for drugs. There's diabolical things that are causing a serious disconnect. And this element of love that we are going to have to come up with as the body of Christ and as individuals, and this capacity to love and the capacity to heal. When you have that kind of damage and serious dysfunction going on, it's hard for a child to say just simply that my mom and my dad, they're translating that into they're angry. You don't love me. How could you do this? All that stuff is going in at a very early age, and they're not understanding. Nobody understands addiction. If you're not an addict, you don't understand. There was a lady on, I think it was TikTok, I'm not sure, but she was using drugs, and her son was 3 or 4 years old, and she would put him in a car seat and put him in the attic so that she couldn't hear him while her friends were downstairs using drugs. And she put him in the attic one time, and she left him up there for 4 days, and he died. And she's in prison, as she should be. Beautiful woman, crazy because she was on drugs, but that addiction component caused her to not be in her right mind, and it caused her to do something that now she is conscious that she's done. She's conscious of the fact that she's done it. Sometimes the things people do with their hands to other people, and then they have to live with the memory that they did this thing. And if they're in the process of healing, they got to accept it. all this is the ministry of love. Love requires correction. It's a tool. It goes into the dirty to do the dirty work, and it requires structure. It requires facing the process of healing requires facing what's happened, facing what happened to a human being, what one human being did to another. So the complexity that can happen, for one person to the next is monumental. When something as simple, and I don't mean it's simple, something as frequent as the process of married people getting a divorce destroys the children, because they stand in the middle, and while the husband and the wife are throwing arrows at each other, it passes through the kids, and nobody can stick in there no more. Everybody's, I'm out of here, I'm out of here. Just because they get upset, I'm out of here. And they understand what covenant means, and that you don't just leave because you get mad. You don't have the option. It shouldn't be that easy. There's a lot of things that have broken down because of the lack of love. And then now we have lack of love generation 1 having lack of love generation 2, 3, or 4. I was talking to my aunt yesterday, and she was reminding me of the abuse that my grandmother endured from my grandfather, and that my mother, this is inconceivable, but it happened. My mother would have to go into my grandmother's bedroom after my grandfather beat her up and clean her up. So she helped clean the blood up so she could go back out and fix a dinner. I'm surprised he's still alive, quite frankly, but that's what happened. And so that abuse, and that living on 10, and living in such an anxious environment, is something that it creates it does something to a child. It does something to an adult. It does something to another human being. Even if you are a neighbor and you hear a person beating another person in the next house over, or the next apartment over, it does something to you, because human beings are not supposed to do that to each other. And so you can't just listen. You got to figure it out. You got to pray about what to do, but you can't just let it happen. You got to say something or do something, or whatever. And I tell you to think about it, because I have not just me, but that happens in my family. We have literally stood in there and said something or did something. But bullying is not an okay process. What I'm saying is that abuse, addiction, hate, it's all a form of just a form of internal hatred, because you get up close to do abuse. And addiction, an addict messes up everybody in the family, because everybody now has to be codependent to make it okay to just try to deal with alcoholism, addiction, any kind of addiction that causes you to take gambling. It could be anything, and it causes such a dysfunction that kids now are functioning in a highly dysfunctional situation, just trying to grow up, just trying to get along, just trying to make it. Some of them become some of the most incredible individuals, and some of them don't make it. My one of the ladies that I used to work with, that was I did a program with her. She said she was 8 years old. One of her parents was an addict, and the other one was an alcoholic. She had no parents. She said she got dressed and took herself to church. She walked to church, and at 8 years old, she started going to church, and she got saved. She's a phenomenal program director now, but her story, and to look at her, you would never know what happened and what that was. You look at Joyce Myers and her life, this dysfunction and this thing of lack of love and the lack of structure It's something, love is, it heals and puts things back in place. And sometimes love is going to require you to go in there and say yes to some stuff and no to some stuff. It requires you to intervene. It requires you to not turn your head and act like you don't see stuff, like you don't hear stuff. It requires you to get involved. And you can't, things are not going to heal them. Things are not going to heal themselves. A crazy person, crazy wife, crazy husband, crazy mother, crazy father, they don't just wake up one morning. I mean, maybe on occasion they can. They have angelic visit or something like that. But most of the time they don't wake up and go, oh, I'm going to be sober today. I'm going to change my life. Something has to happen. Something, a Paul has to have a Damascus Road experience and come into a Jesus. That's what it required. Every one of the disciples had a point of interaction where they met Jesus. They were doing their thing, and then Jesus came. They were doing their thing, and then something else happened. But there has to be a disruption. That thing of that evil, the momentum of the evil, it don't just stop by itself. It happens because people somebody says something, somebody does something. Love steps in the gap. You heard me say many times on 9/11 how an entire department died in the two buildings, the Twin Towers. That was duty and that was love. Walked back into the building to help save as many as they could. As men and women of God, your task and your duty is founded in love. You have love, that your love, and then you have structure and ability to articulate and make the change. It takes the skill set and the love and the intention. The firemen that walked back in the building, they were not in the building. They could have stayed out of the building and let everybody fend for themselves, but duty brought them back in the building. We're not asking you to walk into a burning building, but I'm asking you to pay attention to what's around you, and do not get along with the evil, and do not pretend like it's okay. But you have got to figure out, and through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and we will be having different techniques and programs. We will be talking about education on how to address a thing, but you got to open up your mouth, and you got to figure out how to make a difference. You pray first, but then there's going to be a point where you're going to have to take an action. You're going to have to take an action. You're going to have to I remember one time there was I don't know how it got there, but right in front of my apartment, these guys were dragging this other guy out and were literally beating him in the middle of the street. I mean, the man was screaming. And so before I had even thought about it, I had my phone, I ran downstairs, I had 911, I told him to call 911, get off of him. And I was screaming at the man, get off of him. And he kept saying, mind your own business. No, I'm not minding my own business. I was using I was cussing at him just like he was cussing at the man. And I'm tired. I'm saying it wasn't no safe. I was going in because you're getting ready to kill this man or whatever he did. That's for the police to handle, but do not kill him. Not right here. And so he stopped. But if somebody is doing something, it's the bystanders. It's the lack. Love engages you. That's what I wanted to say. Love will cause you to get engaged to a situation. Love causes you to bring the food, bring the lunch, to help with the bills. Love causes you to help with the reading, help with the babysitting, help come alongside somebody. When you come alongside somebody, you come alongside them however is necessary. You can have single moms. You can have teenagers that are struggling with decisions. Love, and then the next thing behind love, you got to have courage. You got to have courage to step into the assignment. Knowledge of what to do when you step into the assignment. And you got to understand, you're going to step in and you're going to do what you're supposed to do, and then you're going to leave unless God has assigned you for a long-term situation. But love bears your arm. It is a bare arm. It exposes you. You can't love safely. You have to love completely. You have to make a difference. Sometimes, for love of country, soldiers go to war and they die in situations that they have absolutely nothing to do with. They have absolutely nothing. So that's why one of the practices in Africa, as I mentioned many times before, when two villages or whatever come together, or tribes or villages come together and they're getting ready to fight and they cannot work it out. Testosterone, I have no idea what purpose. I know it's very important. I know it helps procreate populations of any species. But testosterone is where you got 50, maybe 200 cows out there, and you'll have two bulls fighting, one almost getting ready to kill the other. That happens with every elephants, tigers, walruses, hippopotamus. Everybody, the male species gets in there and starts fighting for who's going to procreate the next generation. Horses do it. Everybody does it. The males fight. And that testosterone makes you crazy, because they'll almost fight to the death. There's plenty of, this is God's design. So they'll almost fight to the death. But in the human villages and tribes, when the men cannot figure it out, when they can't beat on the drum and figure out how to clunk the other one over the head, then the women meet. And women have conversations, because it's their blood and their babies. It's one thing to start a baby. It's another thing to grow one in your womb and push it out. You're not so quick to toss them up in a battle. You're not so quick to kill them. And if you guys can work it out, my children don't need to shed blood for something you could have negotiated a little bit further. And if that's the case, like they used to tell people in Congress, send your kids, and then I'll send mine. But since you up here signing off papers, sending people out to war, send your children first. And they may want to do that. Then don't be sending mine. That's one of the things that it requires you to start having these conversations. Is this really necessary? Can it be negotiated? What exactly are we doing? Again, duty and love. Love is a very powerful, it's a very powerful tool, and you have to use it. And women, we are good at loving. We're very good at circling the whole thing and getting an understanding of what needs to happen and putting it into perspective. We are really good at not just seeing it one way, looking at a balance. When we look at children, it's not those children, it's our children. It's not those people, it's our people. It's a community understanding, because mother is mother is mother is mother, no matter what. Mothers, even across species of animals, the mothering instinct is very powerful to preserve and to perpetuate life. And then once life gets here, we have an intricate understanding of how to keep it going. We figure it out. We know how to look at a thing and figure out how to keep this thing alive. And this is my final point. In the neonatal care, there's people that come in just to hold the preemie babies, just to hold the babies that are struggling, because love is a factor of healing. You can't even start a healing regimen, conversation, process, regimen. When I say regimen, that's for the consistent teachers. Do a love regimen to show up and teach their students. Coaches, people that encourage other people to keep them going. Boot camp instructors. You may not call it is love. It is a form of love to help get people over the hump. And sometimes you have to be forceful with your love. It's not just yes, yes, yes is not love. Yes to the right things and no to the other things. Structure is a form of love. Patterns and consistency is a form of love. Showing up every day on a routine so that somebody can develop some security to know that you're going to show up in their life. consistently, especially people that have been abandoned. They don't trust. So you got to go the distance and let them know, I'm not going to run away because you are not understanding that I love you, and that you're not understanding. And you need to understand how people don't understand it. You have to become a master at knowing how to love another individual. And in order to do that, you can't be all broken up yourself. To love somebody is a power move, warrior power move, to love another human being. To stand in the gap and say, I'm not going to leave you. To stand in the gap and say, not on my watch. To stand in the gap and say, what do you need me to do for you? And to step in on behalf of them. Love is a powerful, powerful step in. And you need to be saturated in it. But you also need to be a force to be reckoned with, so that you go to bat for your children. Your kids come home. Some kids come home under having been abused, and there's nobody to tell because nobody cares. So they just become a victim, and they just melt into nothingness because nobody stood up. Versus when you have a big brother, you have a big sister, you have a mother or father, that you guys stick together and you follow up, then the mother goes to the principal's office, goes to the classroom, and shows up at the school the next day. You know how many times you had to show up at school the next day because something's going on with your kids, and you need to know what's going on. Those are the kids that thrive because somebody is pushing them into their future. Somebody is saying, I got your back, keep on going, you can do it, just let me help you. You help with homework too. You get in there and you help them get it done. And then after they finish getting it done, you reward them like they did it all by themselves. They didn't do it all by themselves, but you're pushing them along. But that's what you got to do. It's required of children, teenagers, adults, spouses, old people. Everybody needs love, encouragement, fortitude, protection. That's your job. Be really good at it. Be really good at standing in the gap. Be really good at being the one to show up. Get it done, and it will make a world of difference. Okay, that's it for now. I'm going to turn off the YouTube.